Welcome back to Finnish Made Easier. Today we're going to be talking about plural accusative. So I've already made a video on singular accusative. I would really recommend watching that one first. It's going to give a nice background on kind of what plural accusative is. And then we're going to be referencing partitive and plural partitive quite a bit in this video as well. We're going to talk a little bit about the differences like we did in the singular accusative video. So those would all be good to kind of have a decent background on. You don't have to be perfect at it, but at least kind of understand what partitive is, how singular accusative works. That'll help a lot for this video. So plural accusative, just like it sounds like, is just the plural form of accusative. So you might remember accusative and partitive are the cases that are used on objects. So like if I found a hat, hat is our object, I is the subject. So partitive and accusative are for the objects. And I mentioned in the last video about singular accusative that accusative is more used with like complete actions or when you're referencing the total object, things like that. So this is going to be kind of the plural version of that, and I'm going to get into kind of how to use it versus plural partitive. But first, I want to talk about a little bit about how to form plural accusative. So just like any other ending in Finnish, we just find the stem, add the ending, and soften. This isn't one of those special endings. The ending here is T though. So just find the stem, add T, and soften. And you might realize that that looks the exact same as a plural subject or plural nominative as it's called. So when you have, I have a video about how when you have like the subject and you want to make it plural, you add the T onto the word. And plural accusative does look the exact same as that. In fact, you'll see sometimes online, or when you're learning about this, you might learn that these are the same form, that objects can just be in plural nominative. I really like to separate it out, that the plural nominative is different than plural accusative, because I think it makes more sense to go from singular to plural this way. Because you might remember that singular accusative, I had the N, that can be the ending for both genitive or accusative. But those plurals, if you take that same sentence and make it plural, you're going to get different plurals. So the N for genitive has plural genitive, and the N for accusative goes to a T. So I think it is important to keep that distinction, but just keep in mind that you will see it online sometimes as being the same thing as plural nominative, things like that. But let's get into forming it a little bit. Just recognize that it does look the same to plural nominative, so if you already know how to form that, then it's the exact same. So, pretty standard. So if we have like kissa, which is cat, we want to find the stem. Well, we already have the stem right there. We want to add T, kissat, and then we want to soften. Well, SS doesn't soften, so we're all good. For pöytä, which is table, we find the stem. Well, this is already the stem again. We add the T, and then that T does soften. T softens to a D. It's also called kopete and softening. I've got a video on that if you don't know much about why this T is changing to a D. And then the last one, ihminen. The stem of ihminen is ihmise. If you're not really sure how stems work, I've got some videos on that as well. Not super important for this video, but good to see. Ihmise, that's the stem. Then we add the T. And S doesn't soften, so we're left with ihmiset. So if you're used to adding cases, this should look pretty familiar, this process. I don't want to spend too much time on it because I want to spend more on just how accusative works, but yeah, those are some examples of just putting some stuff into plural accusative. So now let's talk about a little bit more when to use it. So again, plural accusative is going to be on the objects of sentences. So like I gave you the gifts. The gifts is the thing that you're giving. So you and gifts are both different types of objects. You is going to have a special case on it, which is LLE. Gifts, there's no really specific thing. It could be partitive, it could be accusative. We're going to see if this one's going to be accusative. Like I found the hats, hats is the object. Eat the apples, apples is the object. So we're going to be putting things on the objects of the sentences, not the subjects or the things doing something. And it's pretty similar to singular accusative. Singular accusative was where we're dealing with the whole object, or maybe with like completed actions. This one, with plurals, we can kind of simplify it to whenever we're dealing with the whole plural object that we're referencing. So like if I say the gifts, I'm in this sentence I'm meaning like all of them. So like I gave you the gifts. That sentence kind of sounds like I gave you all the gifts I was trying to give you. I gave you the gifts. One big sign to kind of tell that it is this is the word the before a plural. Because in English, not all plurals have to have the before it. I could say I gave you gifts. That probably wouldn't use plural accusative because it's just saying like I gave you some gifts. It doesn't really imply that I'm using all the gifts that I had. But if I gave you the gifts, this sounds like I've completed that action, I'm done. I gave you the gifts, all the ones that I was planning to give. Similarly, when I say I found the hats, you can tell it sounds a little different if I just say I found hats. That just kind of sounds like, oh, I found some hats. You'll probably put it in plural partitive. But when I include this the, I found the hats, it makes it sound like I have found all the hats I was looking for. I found the hats. So we're going to put this one in plural accusative as well. And this one, I'll eat all the apples. Another kind of way to tell that it's going to be an accusative is this word all. If we're saying all the apples, then we're definitely probably going to use plural accusative. So kind of things to look for is all and the. And just think like, am I using, when I'm saying gifts, hats, or apples, or whatever our plural word is, am I referencing all of the apples? Doesn't necessarily mean all the ones in the whole world, but all the ones that I'm talking about. It's not just like I ate some, but I ate the apples or all of the apples, things like that. So hopefully this makes sense as we go through more examples. I want to practice forming some of these sentences. So I gave you the gifts. So again, since I gave you probably all the gifts I was meaning to, if I say the, we can put this one in plural accusative. So annoin sinulle is I gave you the gifts. We have lahja. It's already in its stem, so we can just add t. And hj doesn't soften, so we get annoin sinulle lahjat. This next one, I found the hats. Just want to reiterate again. If I just say I found hats, then it probably would be imperative. It's just like I found some hats. It's kind of what that sounds like. When you say hats, you're not referencing like all the hats you were meaning. But when you say I found the hats, it makes it sound like, oh, it's I found the hats I was looking for. So all the ones that I'm referencing are the ones that I found. So it's probably going to be plural accusative. You can kind of think of these as similar to, again, the completed action and the whole object. Very similar to singular accusative, just plural. So I found the hats, löysin, and then hattu is the stem. We add the T, and then double T softens to a single T. So we get hatut. I'm just going to move this UT over so it looks a little bit better. Hatut. So we just, the stem was the same. We added the T, and I softened the double T to a single T. So löysin hatut. Then I'll eat the apples. Since you're eating all of the apples, you're probably going to put it in accusative. So we have syön kaikki. This is I eat all. An interesting thing to note here that will come up quite a few times when you're doing accusative is kaikki doesn't usually take like this kind of a case. So when you're putting something in plural accusative, you're not also going to put it on kaikki. That's just kind of how kaikki works. You might think that it would have noun adjective agreement, but notice that when we're doing it today, when we're putting plural accusative on our words here, we're not going to have to put it on kaikki, just on our object. So I'll eat all the apples. Syön kaikki omena. That's the stem. We add the T. And then we don't need to soften because N doesn't soften. So I get syön kaikki omenat. So those are some common cases of accusative. One common thing to note here when forming accusative or when knowing when to form accusative is one major time that you're not going to use accusative is if it follows a rule for partitive. So even if we are referencing the whole object, if we follow one of those rules for partitive, like negative sentences, we have a partitive verb, or maybe if it's a continuous action, any of those things, there's a few more as well. Even if we're referencing the whole thing, we're going to use partitive instead. So we have to check for the partitive rules first. So I'm going to switch up the board and we're going to do some examples of plural sentences that use plural partitive and plural sentences that use plural accusative so that you can see the difference and hopefully this will click a little bit better. So I'm going to switch up the board and we can get right into that. All right, I've switched up the board and now we've got lots of example sentences here. So what I'm going to try to show here is very similar sentences, show kind of when to use plural accusative versus especially plural partitive. I also have a little bit of just singular accusative and singular partitive in here. So you can kind of see the relationships between the singulars and the plurals. So hopefully this kind of helps you know exactly when you're supposed to use plural accusative versus when you're supposed to use something else. So I want to start off with just kind of these three examples. So I see a bird, I see birds, or I see the birds. So these are all going to use näen and then just a case on lintu. So näen as I see. All we have to change to do these different things is whatever we do on lintu. So the first one, I see a bird. So this one is obviously not plural, it's just a bird. So we're going to use either singular partitive or singular accusative. So you remember this one is a total object. When we see something, you see the whole thing. So this one's actually going to be accusative. You saw the whole bird. So we'll say näen linnun. So what we did to get linnun is I added an N there and I softened NT to NN. So näen linnun. This next one, I see birds. So it feels very similar. I see a bird versus I see birds. Neither of them are like super definite. But this one we're going to use accusative. With I see birds, remember I said with plurals, we use only plural accusative when we're meaning the full group that you're talking about. When you say I see birds, the birds you're talking about isn't all of them that you're seeing. You're just saying I'm seeing some birds in general. This word birds isn't referring to any specific group of birds. You're just saying, oh yeah, I see birds. You're not like, oh, I see the birds that I was trying to look for. You're just kind of generally seeing birds. So this one we're actually going to use plural partitive. So näen lintuja, which you can learn how to form with my plural partitive video. And then this one, I see the birds. So hopefully you can kind of hear a difference between these sentences in English. I see the birds versus just I see birds. This is just generally, you're seeing maybe a subcategory of the group of birds. You see some birds. But when you add in the, now the birds you're referring to is only the birds that you're seeing. So now you're talking about the whole thing. Again, kind of this way to know sometimes is just the word the. I see birds is general. I see the birds is very concrete. You're seeing all the ones that you want. Like, oh, I see the birds. Maybe someone referred to them. So with this one, we're going to use accusative. So like, näen linnut. When we're going from singular accusative to plural accusative, you can always just take that N and change it straight to a T if you don't want to go through and form it all again. So linnun goes to linnut. So yeah, that's kind of all those different sentences. Now these next ones, I'm going to kind of focus on how the partitive rules take precedence over the accusative rule. So hopefully here you kind of saw when we would normally use accusative versus partitive. Now we're going to use times when it maybe should feel like you should use accusative, but we're still going to use partitive. So if I say I made the pies, we have tein piirakka, except we're going to have to put piirakka into a case. The pies, when you say the pies, it sounds like you're referring to, yeah, I made the pies that we wanted. Like you made all the pies that we needed. Rather than just, if you just said I made pies, we'd have this situation here where it's like, yeah, you made some pies, but here we're talking about I made the pies. So you're referring to the full group. I made the pies that we wanted. So we're going to put it in plural accusative. Tein piirakat. Notice I softened the double K to a single K when I added the T. Tein piirakat. Here we have I didn't make the pies. And so the important thing to notice here is we're still talking about the pies. So it's all the pies. This isn't a general statement. I didn't make the pies. However, we follow one of the partitive rules, which was negative sentences. You remember that in the partitive rules, negative sentences usually go to partitive. So even though it kind of follows both the partitive and the accusative, we're going to default to partitive. So we're going to get en tehnyt piirakoita. So, and again, if you don't know how to form plural partitive, that's not super important in this video. I've got videos on that if you are curious though. So en tehnyt piirakoita. That is, I didn't make the pies. So I guess what I want to point out here is if you're not sure, you're like, it kind of feels like it should be partitive, but it also feels like it should be accusative. I would usually use partitive in that case because you probably have a good reason for thinking it's partitive, like this negative sentence. This last example I want to do here, I have 4 different sentences that again we get by just changing the last word kirja. So we have luen, which is either I'll read or I'm reading. It kind of means both in Finnish, or at least it can depending on context. So I figured I'd simplify it this way. Luen, and then kirja is what we're going to change. So which is going to be the book or the books, depending on how we change the word. So I'll read the book. So this is going to be singular. So we're going to have either singular accusative or singular partitive. And if we're saying I'll read the book, that kind of implies that you're going to read the whole book. It's going to be a completed action that you're talking about. There's no like partial stuff here. So we're just going to use accusative. It's not general, it's not partial, it is complete. So we're going to use plural accusative, a singular accusative, sorry. So we get luen, and then singular accusative is just we add an n. Luen kirjan. But if you say I'm reading the book, now there's no completed action. Now it is a continuous action. Continuous actions go to partitive. So there's no completion and there is continuation. And so we're going to say I'm reading the book is in partitive. Luen kirja. So hopefully that's familiar. That's how it works with singulars. So how does this apply to plurals? Well, it's basically the exact same. If we have I'll read the books, we're saying we're going to have a completed action with all of the books. I do want to specify here too, if we're just going to say I'll read books, we're going to use partitive, not accusative, because you're talking about a general amount of books. It's not very specific. You're not referring to like the books, you're just saying I'll read books, which might be like some books, and some always is partitive. So if you just say I'll read books, probably going to be partitive, but here we have I'll read the books. So you have a group of books, I'm going to read the books, it's probably going to be completed, so we put it in plural accusative. Luen kirjat. So however, when I'm reading the books, even though it's still the books, you have the books. Since it's a continuous process, it's not completed, we're still going to use partitive, just plural partitive. So luen kirjoja. So kind of cool, we can get 4 different sentences with luen kirjan, luen kirja, luen kirjat, and luen kirjoja. They all sound very similar, but they all convey a different meaning. So that's kind of the importance of understanding the difference of accusative and partitive. And you'll notice that kirjan, the plural is just kirjat, and kirja, the plural is just kirjoja. They line up very well. So hopefully that kind of helps you understand when you should use plural accusative. Again, just look for the or all whenever you're talking about a very specific group of a plural word and you're using all of them in your sentence. It's not just a general plural group. Then you're going to use plural accusative. But if something has both a partitive rule and that accusative rule, then tend to partitive. So hopefully that clears things up. If you still have questions about this, put them in the comments and I will try to get to them. I also will have a document in the description, just like always, with lots of examples with plural accusative and another reminder of the rules. So I take a look at that if you're still a little confused on exactly when to use plural accusative. But I hope this explanation helps, and thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Heippa!